It's the Orange Bowl taking place in Miami. Penn State, Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a 1.5 point favorite as we see it now. Just yesterday, I was seeing 2.5. So down to 1.5 most places, and over under is set at 44.5, and that number has not moved at all. Um, you've got even money for Penn State on the money line. And so that is a little bit of a tell for me as far as what Vegas is thinking about this one. So and Notre Dame minus 120 favorite on the money line there. And that's where I'm going to kind of focus my efforts today, because with a 1.5 point line, you might as well just take one of these teams on the money line if you're going to bet that way. Look, I'm interested to see how each team is going to be able to rebound from a bunch of injuries. Look, we talked all season about how the season getting longer is going to, I mean, it's inevitably going to cause more injuries, right? There's going to be more injuries here towards the finish line, and both of these teams are pretty banged up, man. You saw Abdul Carter banged up, Danny Dennis Sutton banged up. Those are the two edge rushers that are just absolute monsters in each of their own right when they're healthy. How effective are they going to be able to be against this Notre Dame offensive line? And then on the other side of that, Notre Dame has dealt with a ton of injuries, right? We've talked about the defensive tackles that are out. Those are big time leaders on this defense. Lost some big help in the secondary earlier this season. So, do you start to see some of the water go through those cracks? I guess is kind of my thought process on this one, and I'm interested to see which team is able to rebound from those better. Look, we just came off of a Sugar Bowl in which we saw Notre Dame win in a lot of different ways, Mason. They really did. They won in special teams. They won defensively, offensively. There was good things to take, I thought, from all three phases for Notre Dame in that game. And not to say that there wasn't, some of that for Penn State as well, but I think you're going to need to see another game like that for Notre Dame to be able to come out victorious on this one. I think you're going to need to see all three phases really lending a helping hand in this one. And I'm not saying Notre Dame can't do that. Notre Dame seems like a really resilient team. And look, that drive at the end of the game that Notre Dame was able to put together to ice that game against Georgia, that was a championship drive, man. And that really is a tell for me as far as a team that is able to make it deep into the playoffs, which Notre Dame already has at this point, and got a couple of the biggest wins that this program has seen since the '90s. I mean, let's just be real about it. So Notre Dame is flying on top of the world right now. I would say Penn State is in a similar situation, Mason. These are some of the biggest wins that we've seen since the mid 2010s, right, for Penn State. So both teams flying high here. The over/under is set really low. I suspect both teams are looking to do the same thing here, run the football. We know Notre Dame is. I mean, Notre Dame barely threw the ball down the field at all against Georgia, and we're very content to do so. Really, really didn't try to act like they were going to do it at all. Didn't threaten to do it a whole heck of a lot, and I don't think that their intentions are to do that because that's not their strength. So this game's going to be played inside of a telephone booth, my friend. And which team is tough enough to take the other one out in close quarters, close hand-to-hand combat, because that's what this game's going to be. Georgia's offensive line really came into play as far as weighing Georgia down in that football game, Mason. And credit to Notre Dame, they made some big plays. I'm not trying to take anything away from the Irish. The Irish won that game. There's no doubt about that. I don't know that Penn State's offensive line is going to hand over the ball a couple of times the way that Georgia did, allowing the rush off the edges. Georgia just could not figure out the tackle situation. What, three different people play tackle in that game? And I think that's just kind of tells you what Georgia's confidence level was in their starters and tackles that they had, lined up, how many different ones they had lined up ready to go in. So I look, it hasn't been a good offensive line for Georgia this year. Notre Dame was able to really exploit that. Bryce Young, specifically, that's going to be a guy that you've certainly got to keep your eye on in this game. Um, which team can win this thing in a telephone booth, man? That's my question. And which one is able to overcome injuries at a higher level? That's going to go, I think, a long way in deciding this one. And not to mention special teams. That was a big deal for Notre Dame in the game against Georgia. I think special teams is really going to have to help out in this one, especially flipping field and things like that. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, well, first of all, I agree with you when you say this game's going to be played in a phone booth. I that 100% agree with that. This we just saw this game for Notre Dame. This is pretty much the same game we just watched against Georgia. Playing a team with a quarterback that's capable. Now we didn't really know what Gunnar Stockton would be going into that game, but I would say that Gunnar Stockton played a pretty good game. I think he played a game that I would expect Drew Aller to come in and match. Right? I wouldn't say that watching that game that Gunnar Stockton just lost that game for Georgia. And what we saw out of the quarterback position in particular was a quarterback that can run but is likely going to pass, right? And then a run game that couldn't get established. To me, like on paper, I look at Penn State and Georgia and their offenses and say, yeah, they're probably pretty similar in some ways. But I look at what or how the game unfolded for Georgia, and they Georgia was not able to because they got down early in between the end of the second half and beginning of the first half. There was a 14-point swing in that game, and Georgia could not. They couldn't just start running the football right in the third and fourth quarters. They had to rely on the pass. So we didn't really see the Riley Mills injury take effect. We never got to see Georgia exploit that. So can Penn State exploit that in a game that's more competitive, where they don't have as much of a discrepancy in score? And if that's the case, are we going to see Notre Dame get exploited? Due to the injuries.
Yeah.
That to me is a question on the Notre Dame side of the football when it comes to the injuries. And then also Xavier Watts, I know he went out in the game against Georgia. It seems like he's fine. It seems like he's going to play, but you just never know if he's not 100%. How that's going to affect the run game for Penn State as well. But he was the defensive MVP or the game MVP or whatever for that game, so it seems like he's okay with playing hurt. But nonetheless, on the Penn State side of the football, they got to do the same thing. They're banged up on the defensive line as well. So can they stop the run of Notre Dame? I think so. I think that they can. I really like what this defense is doing for Penn State, and I think that they're built to stop the run. Right? If Riley Leonard is challenged in this football game, I think it bodes well for Penn State. I think if because to me, going back to the Georgia game, we didn't see Riley Leonard get challenged. He didn't have to be. His defense won him the game, and special teams won him the game. And all Riley Leonard had to do was not drop the football, hand the ball off, occasionally pass. He did some good things, run the football effectively. He was slippery when he did run the football, but mainly just don't turn it over. And they had the game won after the first half, really after the beginning of the second half. That's all that he was asked to do throughout the game. I'm anxious to see if Penn State can challenge Riley Leonard. I think that the coaches have to be saying to their team right now that if they're able to do that, then it increases their chances of success in this football game. And I totally expect them to challenge Leonard in this game, Mark.
Oh, there I am. Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'll just come right out and say it. I think Penn State stands a really good chance of winning this one, man. I
Mm-hmm.
really do, and it seems like the voting public is coming in on Penn State, and that scares me a little bit. And look, I'll be completely frank with you guys. I quit putting my money on these games whenever the playoffs started. Right, whenever the regular season stopped and the conference championship game stopped, I quit betting because I was already up for the year. So I'm like, for me to sit here and try to pick one of these suckers, man, I mean, it really feels 50-50 in this particular game. So I'm going to go with Penn State to win the game, but not going to be surprised at all if Notre Dame is able to win this thing. And look, I liked some of your comparisons about Penn State's offense, Georgia's offense, and the difference I think for Penn State here is going to be they got a lot better running back room now. We've seen those guys get banged up. Every running back at this point in the season, if you've made it this far, is going to be banged up a little bit. So I don't want to make too much of that, but I really like the running back room for Penn State here. I think it's going to be able to help them control the clock a little bit. And again, I think special teams is just going to be so daggum important in this one. You got to be able to flip the field when it's time to flip the field. And we've seen teams struggle with that in the playoffs, and more so this year than I think I've ever seen. Tons of mistakes in the special teams game, and you know, if somebody makes a mistake, did the other team cause that mistake? I mean, that's all an argument that you can make. But give me Penn State here. I like Penn State's versatility on offense that I've seen in the postseason. I've seen Penn State in the conference championship game against Oregon be able to do things that I thought they couldn't do offensively. I'll just be frank with you, Mason. I didn't think they could do some of that stuff. And throughout the playoffs, they've continued to do that, and their defense has stepped up whenever they've needed them to. Um, I think Penn State has got a better chance of getting Notre Dame to play along with their game plan. I thought Georgia just played exactly into Notre Dame's hand, played exactly the game that Notre Dame wanted to play. And you mess with the bull, you get the horns, right? And that's exactly what Georgia got. You mess with the Irishman, you get the uppercut, right? I guess you'd say. And Georgia got the 1-2 and got knocked out. So wouldn't surprise me either team on here. Also, wouldn't surprise me to see the under hit in this game as well. I don't think you're going to see a ton of explosive games. Excuse me, a ton of explosive plays in this game. So give me Penn, and give me the under. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you on both of those plays. I'm really looking at Notre Dame and wondering if they can have as much success against Penn State's offensive line as they had against Georgia, because that defensive line was, despite being hurt, despite everybody saying that Riley Mills being out is going to hurt that defensive line, those guys played their tails off.
They did.
R.J. Oben came alive in this game. The transfer from Duke, Bryce Young, the freshman, he shined at times in this game.
RJ Oben's
Had a
got to be
couple.
like 30 years old at this point, by the way. I mean,
Yes. I
my
think he's one of
God,
those 6-year guys. But
7, I think. I swear,
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. But then, you had number 44, and I'm going to butcher his name, but Tui Halamaka. He really came on in that game against Georgia, had probably a handful of big plays in that one. And Howard Cross is just doing what he can to stay on the field, I think, at this point. But if those guys can play to the level that they did last week, I really like Notre Dame's chances, because to me, if those guys play well, I think you're shutting down Penn State's offense. Regardless, though, if they play some semblance of that, I like the under here as well. I think that's the safest bet from a betting perspective. If you guys are crazy enough to bet on these playoff games, go
Yeah.
for it. But I like the under. We were on the under last week with Notre Dame and Georgia. Obviously, that one hit as well. I think we're going to see a similar type of game here, a defensive and special teams type of game. It's going to be very quick. It's probably 2.5 hour game or something like that. I mean, and I'm expecting it to be a short game, and but I like Penn State in this one. To me, I trust the offense of Penn State a little bit more. I love the play calling from Kotelnicki. I hope that I'm anxious to see what he does in year two. I think that he's had a very impressive year one, and now we're at the end of year one, so these players kind of know what to expect from him and vice versa. I think that this offense creates enough opportunities for Penn State to win the game against a tough defense in Notre Dame, and I feel like that's going to be the difference. I mean, we're talking Probably a 3-point game here when it's all said and done. I do think this is going to be a really good, really fun game if you like defensive type games.
I think so too, man. It's going down in Miami. Again, that one is going to be January 9th, so that's going to be Thursday at 7:30 Eastern. I keep having to check because these days are so crazy that they've got us scheduled on. But going down Thursday night, and we will be here on the channel to talk about it. I'm thinking after the game, probably on Friday. So come and check us out here on the First and Long College Football Show. We'll be chatting it up.